think now is a good time to kind of take stock of the NFC East, kind of see where we're at a little bit, and kind of break down where this division is in terms of strengths and weaknesses for teams and what this competition might look like in the fall. All right, so our methodology here every year, folks, we do this. We go position by position. I have 5 offensive positions, 5 defensive positions. Then we'll do special teams and the coach, and we'll kind of rank each team 1 through 4, and then we will total the points at the end and see where each team stands in terms of total points and where they rank. So let's start with the quarterback position, guys. The way I look at this, I think Dallas and Philly are a tie. I think Carson Wentz at full strength is a better quarterback by Dak Prescott, but I think his penchant for getting hurt, to be frank, kind of puts those into a bit of a tie. And then I think Daniel Jones is the next guy up based on his rookie performance, and then the Redskins and Dwayne Haskins pull up the rear at number 4.
Well, I would
agree with you with that.
Go ahead, Paul.
No, it's pretty hard to argue with that. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that Andy Dalton going to the Cowboys enhances their depth at the position dramatically.
Good point.
And when you consider that Wentz has had trouble playing 16 games in a season, you have to give Dallas a little bit more of a nod there. I mean, and quite honestly, if it's just the starters, I'm Wentz over Prescott every day of the week, every day of the month, every day of the year. It's not even close. Wentz over Prescott, hands down. But because of Andy Dalton, you have to consider that Dallas has a slight edge on that spot. And I would certainly go Daniel Jones, too. And Dwayne Haskins, very, very far in the rear at number 4.
Well, I also wouldn't overlook the fact that Kyle Allen could very well be the starting quarterback for the Redskins this season, especially if they don't get much on-field work. Remember, he knows the system. Scott Turner's their offensive coordinator. Kyle Allen came over with him from Carolina. So I wouldn't go so far as to pencil in Dwayne Haskins as the starter so quickly. But
I'll tell you what, Lance,
right now,
if they end up starting Kyle Allen, they are going to get reaped over the coals for not taking a quarterback in the draft.
Well, Allen's not necessarily an old man. The last time I checked,
he's not very good.
Well, I mean, we barely saw him. We saw him in a small sample size. He was thrown into the mix because Cam got hurt. I'm not saying that he's the long-term answer, but considering that he knows the system that Scott Turner's implementing, if they went in that direction, I don't think it'd be a stunning development.
I would be stunned. Paul, would you be stunned?
Flabbergasted.
I wouldn't. I would not, because I think there's going to be some interesting decisions that teams are
Are
going to
you
have
related
to
to Kyle Allen?
No, not at all. I'm giving you my
you
realistic
must be.
opinion.
No, you must be.
No, how can I? Wait a minute. You're going to tell me it's crazy to start a quarterback with any on-field work, without any on-field work, who you already know?
Let's put it this way. The narrative out of Washington
offense?
is that Dwayne Haskins supposedly, according to those people down there, was playing better in the last couple of games of last season when he got on the field.
It's not a disrespect to Dwayne Haskins or anything against him. It's just about the fact that Kyle Allen has familiarity with an offense that they're going to run, and Dwayne Haskins does not. That's the difference.
I don't think ownership would be very happy if Dwayne Haskins was not starting week 1.
I think the fans would try to burn that building to the ground.
And if you don't think that ownership in Washington has influence on what happens on the field, then you're sadly mistaken, Lance.
Wow, this is amazing. We have Paul siding with Dwayne Haskins. I never thought I'd hear this.
Well, he doesn't happen to be very good, and that's why the Redskins will finish last in the division.
Well, like I said earlier, I think the Redskins have a lot of questions whether Haskins or Allen is the starting quarterback. All I'm saying is that I would plan for some unusual things perhaps to take place because of what we don't know is going to happen with training camp.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
All right, so we're at quarterback. We're going to give him a 3.5. Dallas and Philly tied. They'll split that top spot. Giants get 2 points for that category. Redskins get 1. Running back here, guys, I feel the same way. I think Dallas and the Giants, you can kind of give that a split there in number 1. Both Elliott and Saquon are excellent. Tony Pollard, I think, is probably a little bit more dynamic than the backups the Giants have on their roster currently, so I would split them at 1. And then you have the Redskins, I think, at 3. They have a pretty big stable there of running backs. And then the Eagles at 4. But I could be convinced on the Redskin-Eagle rankings. Lance, how about you?
Well, I think Zeke is the true workhorse for the Cowboys. He's proven that each and every single season. Everybody else in the division, with the exception of the Giants, really has a running back by committee. So I think you've got to give the Cowboys and the Giants the significant edge because you're going to put that one guy out there and you pretty know much what you're going to get out of them. As far as the Eagles are concerned, Miles Sanders is attractive. The guys behind him have some experience, but Doug Peterson keeps you guessing, and he uses his running backs in a variety of ways. I think I know more about the Philadelphia committee than I do about the Washington committee at this point because a number of those guys have been hurt, and we still don't know whether or not Adrian Peterson is going to be the true number one guy because it's a new coaching staff. So I would probably put it Dallas, the Giants, then I put Philly, and then Washington.
I'll go Washington ahead of Philly only because until Adrian Peterson is actually 6 feet under, I have to believe he can still run for 1,000 yards. He's just unbelievable.
Okay, so we have an even split. I'm going to Nashi, Paul and I both have Washington at 3. So I'm going to give Washington 2 points for the category, and I'll put Philly at the bottom. And we'll see about Miles Sanders, too. He can have a big year in his second year, depending on how they want to use him. All right, wide receivers here, guys. I got Dallas at number 1. To me, that's a pretty easy calculation. I wrote down Philly with the second-best group, and then I looked at it again, and I think there's a real good argument to be made that the Giants should be ranked number 2 on this list in wide receiver, given the fact that Alshon Jeffrey's coming off an injury. We don't know if he even wants to be there. Deshaun Jackson, we know, has trouble staying healthy. Then you just got a bunch of young rookie guys that are talented, but we don't know what they are. So I wound up with Dallas at 1, with Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup, which is an excellent group. I got the Giants at number 2, the Eagles at 3, and then the Redskins pulling up the rear, where they really, besides Terry McLaurin, not a lot of proven guys on that receiver core.
That's a really tough one, John, because the Giants certainly have questions with Sterling Shepard. I don't want to be talking about him with another concussion.
No.
Because that may be the last one he has. And that for all we know, another concussion could put Sterling Shepard's career in a very cloudy situation, and I'm not trying to be funny. Corey Coleman, really would love to see him be able to come back and give them some snaps. But, again, coming off of a serious injury, I just don't know. If both of those guys can make it through the full season, I agree with you. I think the Giants have the second-best receiving core in the division. Now, of course, with Philadelphia, I don't know. What is Hightower and what is Rager going to bring to the table?
Yeah, I don't know.
You talk about Jeffrey coming off of an injury. Deshaun Jackson's another year older. I mean, yeah, those are the two teams that are going to be fighting for the number 2 and the number 3 spots, and both of them have questions. But maybe because of the Giants having a little more experience at the spot, if you want to give them a slight edge, I would not argue.
What do you think, Lance? Be the tiebreaker for us here.
Well, I think the Giants deserve the edge based on proven experience. I don't think there's anything about that. Philadelphia, I think, has the most intrigue, and I think they have a ridiculous amount of speed, but I think we have to see it. Because even Marquise Goodwin, who's another guy that you guys didn't mention, they acquired him from the Niners. He's also somebody that hasn't stayed relatively healthy throughout his career. But you look at the speed with all those guys, Deshaun Jackson, Goodwin, Rager, it's pretty scary who they could put out simultaneously. But right now, it's all based on potential, whereas I think with Golden Tate and Sterling Shepard, you really know what you're going to get out of those two guys. Slayton only has 1 year under his belt, but I think at this point we got a good read of his transition. So I would give the Giants the slight edge over the Eagles.
All right, so I will do that. Giants get 3 points for that category. The Cowboys get 4. Eagles get 2. Redskins get 1. Let's go to tight end here. Do we even have to have a debate about who the number 1 team in this group is? I don't think so. That's going to be the Philadelphia Eagles. They might have the 2 best tight ends in the division on their roster. Dallas Goedert and Ingram, I think, are kind of a toss-up there for who the second-best guy is, and Zach Ertz obviously the best. So Eagles at number 1, and frankly, I think it's a pretty easy call, guys, to put the Giants at number 2. And then I have Dallas with a slight edge over Washington, 3-4, but I could go either way there. Your thoughts? Paul, let's start with you this time.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Dallas at number 3. I do think that Blake Jarwin is a quality player. Now, I don't know so much about how they're going to wind up using Schultz or Bell and how Washington will wind up using their guys. I mean, look at some of the fellas they have behind Jeremy Sprinkle. Richard Rodgers is there. Logan Thomas is there. To me, they're just guys. So, yeah, I'm with you with the Giants being a strong number 2, and I'm going to say Dallas is number 3.
Yeah, I think Dallas deserves to be number 3. I think Blake Jarwin's a far more proven commodity than any of the names you mentioned. They also have Logan Thomas, the Redskins, the converted quarterback. So it's not as if they have a lot of guys that you've thrown out there on a football field and you said, hey, this is exactly what this player is going to give me. I think Jarwin has proven enough, even with Jason Witten coming back. Jarwin's been a very productive tight end. He's been a versatile weapon for them. So I actually don't even think it's close between the Cowboys and the Redskins at this point.
All right, so Dallas gets 2 points. Redskins get 1. Eagles and Giants 1-2 in that category, 4 points and 3 points respectively. Final ranking for the offensive line. And guys, I think we need to make it official. I think the Eagles have officially surpassed the Cowboys for best offensive line in the division. That's been a title the Cowboys have held for a long time. But as Tyron Smith ages a little bit, Travis Frederick just retired, I got to put the Eagles 1 ahead of the Dallas Cowboys.
See, this is a tough one. I know Dallas lost Travis Frederick, their starting center, but the bottom line is one of the 2 guys that could very well start in his place started every single game in 2018, and they wound up winning the division. And I understand Smith is getting up there in age. Zach Martin's still there. Lyle Collins is still there. We'll see what happens at the left guard position. I think McGovern is a guy that could emerge along with the youth of Connor Williams. We don't know what Dillard's going to bring to the table yet. He's still a question mark. And you could argue Lane Johnson's been a little bit banged up. Kelsey's been contemplating retirement. I like Philadelphia, John, but honestly, until I see this group fully healthy, I don't think anybody has supplanted the Cowboys. I would put Dallas 1 still. I'd put Philadelphia 2, and then I think the Giants are 3 and the Redskins are 4.
All right, Paul, break the tiebreaker for Eagles and Cowboys for me.
I have to say, John, I'm going to go with Lance on this one.
All right.
I still have to go with the Cowboys. Until proven otherwise, I'm going to give them the slight edge over Philadelphia. And quite honestly, I agree with Lance, too, with the Giants over the Redskins. I think the Dillard component is the one that makes me put the Eagles at number 2 instead of at number 1.
That's fair.
I like Andre Dillard. Coming out of school, we talked about him a lot as a guy who was going to be a first-round draft pick. We talked about what were the chances the Giants might even look at him. But the bottom line for me is his body of work is not substantial enough to give Philadelphia the edge.
No, I think that's fair. And look, their big question marks at left tackle. The Cowboys' big question mark is center right now and maybe left guard a little bit. So, we'll see how that goes. All right. So the offense is, just for a moment, if you guys want to look at offense only, if we tally these points here, it looks based on my quick math here, 7-11. The Cowboys come out with 17 points offensively in this category. The Eagles come out with 13.5. The Giants come out with 13.5, and the Redskins come out with only 5. So I think this is kind of what you expected looking at these teams heading into the season, right? That, they have some really good offensive teams, and the Redskins would kind of be lagging behind. And I think the Giants' offense should be good. I'm not surprised to see them tied with Philly here for second place in terms of the point totals we put together.
Well, I've said this multiple times. The Giants' offense was not a major issue last season. They had games where they put up plenty of points. The problem is they had to get into a track meet more often than not. And, you look at what Jason Garrett has done with the Cowboys personnel. I think there's some similarities when you compare what he's going to work with here with the Giants. So if anybody from the outside looking in is looking at the upside and potential for the Giants' offense, and you hope that the offensive line makes some strides, I think there's definitely potential for the Giants to put points on the board. It remains to be seen what this defense is going to provide under the new scheme with Patrick Graham. So, nobody should be surprised to see the Giants perhaps in the conversation of Philadelphia for number 2 on that list.
The one thing that I don't think enough of us have talked about yet, and I think that as we get closer to the season, it'll be something that's discussed. If the Giants are going to go a lot of double tight ends, which is something that the Cowboys did with Jason Garrett, a lot of, boy, Caden Smith and Evan Ingram as a double tight end combination could really make this a very explosive offense, because I think both guys can catch, and I know that Smith is a solid blocker, and that's going to help Saquon Barkley immensely as well. I am so jacked up, John. You know how much I love the double tight end formation.
Yep.
I've been talking about this for years. I'm finally going to get to see it this year. At least I think so.
Don't get too excited.
Well, and also remember, Levine Toilolo is another option that they can line up too, is that extra offensive lineman, that big body in double tight end formation.
Well, yeah, I think he would be more in the jumbo.
Yeah.
Okay, I would see when they go triple tight ends, I could see Toilolo getting snaps in those situations, and you load up maybe even two tight ends one side, one on the other, or even go three tight ends all on the same side with an unbalanced line. I could see them doing that too.
All right, let's go to the defensive side of the ball, guys. I've split this up into 5 categories just so we have an even number between offense and defense. I have edge, so that's anybody who rushes the passer off the edge. Defensive line, which is your interior defensive lineman. Linebacker, which is your off-ball linebackers, not your edge rushers. Cornerbacks and safety. So let's go through these very quickly. At the edge spot, guys, I got to give the Redskins the top unit in the league here with Philly right behind. And I think those two groups really stand out as being the top 2 in the division. And then I think just because of DeMarcus Lawrence, Dallas has to be third. He's more of a proven guy than the Giants have at edge. And then the Giants, we talked about their edge rusher situation all across this offseason. I think they have to pull up the rear in this category.
There's really no debate there. And when you look at what Sweat and Young and Kerrigan can do right off the top for the Redskins, immediately you look at that and you say, okay, they're going to be number 1.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take much time to figure that out. And the rest of them just fall in line after that.
Yeah, I've always liked Philadelphia's defensive line, but if we're not including the interior, obviously, in this group, then I think Washington probably has some more options there. Derek Barnett has been dealing with injuries, but he's still an explosive young guy. And Brandon Graham can play on the inside and the outside. So, Washington and Philadelphia are, to me, neck and neck in terms of some of the versatility that can be brought to the table. And then clearly the Cowboys and the Giants have far more questions.
All right, let's go to the interior, guys. I just labeled this defensive line. I really thought about the Giants here, guys. Dalvin Tomlinson, Leonard Williams, Dexter Lawrence, a lot of guys in depth in terms of R.J. McIntosh, B.J. Hill. They got a really nice group, but they don't have a Fletcher Cox. And the Eagles also have Malik Jackson. They've really just brought in good defensive tackle after good defensive tackle. So I still got to put the Eagles on top of this group, but I think the Giants are a close second.
I concur,
I disagree.
John.
Okay.
I absolutely
go ahead,
agree with that. When you start with Fletcher Cox, it's going to be hard to move them down a notch. And until he proves otherwise, that he's no longer a Pro Bowl caliber player, they're still going to have to be number 1 in the division. But I do think the Giants are right there behind them.
See, I disagree. I think the Redskins are right behind them. I think you guys are overlooking what Washington has to work with on the interior. Matt Ioannidis is a solid player. Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne. All those guys have performed admirably, even though some of them have been in the league very long. And Philadelphia, also added Javon Hargrove. Let's not forget about him, what he's going to bring to the table in addition to Fletcher Cox. So I think Philadelphia's 1. I think Washington's 2. I'll give you the Giants 3, but don't overlook Washington. Washington has some real strength at that position.
All right, you're outvoted, unfortunately. So the Giants
That's
come
fine.
in. That's fine.
I'm just going to make my opinion heard. That's
Absolutely. The Giants come in at second place, Redskins third, and then the Cowboys pulling up the rear there. Though they did make some improvements there. They brought in some veterans in Dontari Poe and McCoy.
Gerald McCoy, too, yeah.
So
How
they
much tread is on those tires, though, John?
Why do you think they're last, Paul? All right, let's go to the off-ball linebacker spot, and this is a spot in the division where the Cowboys really still stand out with Jalen Smith. There's an asterisk next to Leighton Vander Esch if he can stay healthy, but even so, I still think they're better than the other 3. And then it really gets interesting. I think Blake Martinez is probably the next best player from the Giants, Eagles, and Redskins groups as off-ball linebackers. Thomas Davis is there, but he's a little bit, on the wrong side of 35, I think, even at this point. So how do you guys see it after the Cowboys? Paul?
That's a tough one for me, John, because, I need to see Martinez on a regular basis, having very little to watch unless we've seen, what you've seen from the Packers. I don't know what Blake Martinez is, and I really believe that there are a number of positions in the National Football League that until you see a guy day in and day out, you really don't know what his value is. And especially when we hear Martinez talking about the scheme and how the Packers wanted to use him. So I don't really have strong conviction on this answer, but I am inclined to go with the Giants behind Dallas. And then after that, I probably am going to go I'm probably going to go Redskins after that. And then Eagles 4th.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you got to put the Giants second tier just because even though we haven't seen how these players are going to perform in the scheme, I think the Giants have more proven commodities with what they added in free agency. There's upside in terms of what Fackrell could bring to the table, having that one double-digit sack season. You've got Blake Martinez. He's been in the league for a number of years. Ryan Connolly, I think very highly of. I know it's a small sample size. You hope he returns
injury, Lance,
to health. Yeah, but the bottom line is from the time we saw him perform,
I
at least think he's got potential there.
I like him, but, can you put it in ink or is it in pencil? That's why I say it don't have a lot of conviction
How much
here.
Can you use in ink in terms of the other teams, though?
Probably not a whole lot.
So, Lance, who do you rank 3-4 between Washington and Philly?
I'm going Washington 3.
I would put Washington as 3-2. I like Thomas Davis still being able to perform at a high level despite the injuries. And Cole Holcomb, by the way, had a really nice season for them last year. And that's somebody in that Ryan Connolly department that, if you want to use Paul's phrase, maybe you're not going to put it down in ink, but I think there's still a lot of upside there with him. So I like what Washington has to offer much more so than Philadelphia.
All right, let's go to the safety, the cornerback spot next. We'll save safety for last. And, I had a lot of trouble with this one, guys. I had to look at it a lot. And with Darius Slay's addition, are the Eagles now the best team at cornerback in the division? Or is James Bradbury and the Giants, even though there's a lot of question marks after that? The Cowboys lose Byron Jones. They don't have really a true number one corner. The Redskins certainly don't. The one I feel best about here is the Redskins are last. And the other three, I think Dallas is next to last, I think. But the Eagles and the Giants, I think I give Philly the nod at number one, but I think I might put the Giants at 2. What do you guys think?
Wow. Well, I'm with you on 3 and 4. 1 and 2 is very difficult because I think that Slay has a higher reputation than Bradbury. But again, it's the kind of thing, John, where I think you learn a lot more about a guy when you see him on a regular day in and day out basis.
Hey, look, both guys are really good players.
They're both good players. I think Slay has a higher reputation, but that doesn't mean he is a better player than Bradbury.
True. But do you like the veterans along with Slay than what the Giants have with a lot of their youth?
I've actually been, to be honest with you, I think that Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas have been a bit underachieving since they came out of school, and I've never been a big Avonte Maddox fan. So I'm not gonna throw a pizza party for the Eagles corners. And as far as the Giants are concerned, hey, do I like some of the flashes I've seen out of guys like Ballantyne and Beal and Baker? We don't know what his situation is going to be. I think the Giants certainly have the potential to be the number one team. Are they the number one team today? Maybe not.
Where do you go here, Lance?
I think you got to give Philadelphia the number one spot. Darius Slay has been a solid corner going back to his Detroit days. I know Paul listed a lot of the players around Slay, and yeah, the reason why a lot of them have underachieved is because they haven't stayed healthy, Paul. I don't think it's that they're bad players. It's just the problem with the Eagles' secondary is you really haven't had that core stay together. But Roddy McLeod is a veteran safety.
Part of the equation. Part of the equation.
Of course it is, but
it counts.
But here's the thing. I have a little bit more faith in terms of Philadelphia right now than the Giants, who you're basing over some of these guys being out there for 5 or 6 games in terms of what they did last season. So while Sidney Jones may not be that impressive, he's got a lot more experience under his belt. And he's also in the same scheme with Jim Schwartz over the last few years. Same thing can be said for some of those other players. So that's why I give the advantage to Philadelphia. By the way, they also have Nickel Roby-Coleman at the slot position.
Yeah, I like him.
Who I also don't think should be overlooked. That was a really nice addition.
Okay, so we're going to put Eagles 1, Giants 2, Cowboys 3, and Redskins last. How about safety, guys? This is another tough spot. I take a look at this, and, there aren't a lot of really established players at safety. I'll use kind words in the division. The Eagles don't have Malcolm Jenkins anymore, which really changes the calculation there. Though McLeod's a solid player. Am I crazy for thinking the Giants might have the best pair of safeties in this division? Is that crazy?
Is Love going to start or is McKinney going to start? Or are they both going to start because they go 3 safeties?
I was thinking more the Peppers-McKinney combination, but who knows?
Well, if it's Peppers-McKinney, then I'll take my chances with McKinney, even though he hasn't played an NFL down yet. I'll take my chances with those 2 guys because I don't think the Cowboys' safeties are anything to write home about at all. I think they've got the 2 least impressive starters. Obviously, we know that Landon Collins is good at some things, but limited in terms of his overall scope, and I'm not a Sean Davis guy. And as far as the Philadelphia Eagles go, yeah, McLeod is still a good player, but I'm not a Jalen Mills guy. So for me, I'm going to go Giants.
How about you, Lance? How do you order these guys
Well,
here?
I think the Giants have a lot of upside there, but once again, if we're using that premise based on how we evaluated the other facets of the team, considering McKinney hasn't played one snap, it's hard to all of a sudden give them the benefit of the doubt under those circumstances. I think Philadelphia has by far the most experience between Rodney McLeod and Jalen Mills, though Mills is a converted corner, but he was playing some safety over the last few years. So I would still put Philadelphia 1 because of the experience and some of the versatility back there.
Philly had 1.
What happened?
Philly over the Redskins with Landon Collins?
Yeah, I am not sold on that Redskins anything in the secondary. The only guy that I like in the Redskins secondary right now is Kendall Fuller, who they brought back from Kansas City. That's the one guy that I would be like, all right, you put out there, you feel good about. And no disrespect to Landon Collins, but even with Landon there last year, and they've had a variety of different coordinators, and they still haven't had answers over these years. So it's hard to get excited about that Washington secondary. Philadelphia, to me, because of the continuity of the scheme and the veteran presence, to me deserves the number 1 spot. I'm fine with putting the Giants 2, the Cowboys are 3, and the Redskins would be 4.
Wow, so we all vastly disagree on this. So I think we're going to have to do a lot of ties here. So why don't, boy, how do you guys want to rank these?
Well, they could share them. All 4 of the teams could share equal points.
Okay, so you want to give everybody 2 points since we're all over
That's
the map?
fine. I think that's
Why
the
not?
best way to go.
All right,
Why not?
fine. That works. All right, so if you want to look at just defensive points now, folks, the Cowboys come out with 11. The Eagles come out with 14. The Redskins come out with 11. And the Giants come out with 12, believe it or not. So you're looking at defenses there that are pretty close in terms of their total numbers. Now, special teams, I have not done a ton of work on these guys. You know, Zerline is now with Dallas. You know how good he is. The Eagles have always had a good special teams group. You know, the Giants punter is excellent. The field goal kicker, we got to see what player shows up in Rosas this year. So, Paul, how do you evaluate these special teams groups?
Well, that one's probably the hardest one to do because how heavily are you going to weigh Joe Judge's reputation? Because
Coaching
his goal
is a separate category, so I think we got to leave that separate.
Yeah. It's hard because I truly believe that Joe Judge doesn't want to be a top 5 special teams group. I think he wants the Giants to be the number 1 special teams group in the entire NFL. I truly believe that is his goal. And I really like the Giants' ability with the number of return guys who are capable of handling that job. Whether or not Coleman is back in the mix or not, I don't know, but I think they have a few guys who could do it. I love the Giants' coverage units. I don't think anybody would argue there. So what are your biggest questions? Well, the biggest question really would be with the kicker, but we know that Rosas was victimized by a lot of operations issues, and what do the Giants do? They go out and they sign a guy who was a Pro Bowl long snapper by grabbing Kreider from the Broncos. So I'm going to say the Giants are number 1 in special teams here, with Philadelphia being a close second.
Philadelphia has had one of the best track records in special teams since Doug Peterson took over.
No doubt.
Because of the personnel, I think the scheme, as you guys alluded to, the playmakers they have. There is some changes with the Giants that you hope would help out Rosas. I would still give, though, the Eagles the tiebreaker in that department because of the experience and continuity factor. And now, you still have Thomas McGahee there for the Giants, so I think that's going to bode very well for the Giants. However, they did lose Michael Thomas. Okay, let's not overlook that. He was a significant player on special teams.
They signed Ebner, and
did.
they've got Cody Core back.
But new faces. Core's not new, but Ebner's new, and you just don't know how these guys are going to fit in. I think Philadelphia returns most of its core. So I'd probably give Philadelphia the slight edge over the Giants. I'd put the Redskins 3, and I'd put the Cowboys 4, because the Redskins have the best punter in the division in Tress Way. I don't even think that's close. Hopkins is not that terrible. I wouldn't put him as the top guy. And Washington has some decent return guys and some intriguing options there. And you look at what Ron Rivera is going to bring over in terms of his Carolina staff. So I would probably put Washington 3 slightly over Dallas.
All right, so I'm going to rank Philly 1, Giants 2, Redskins 3, and I'll put Dallas last to kind of even everything out here a little bit. Okay, finally, let's go to the coaching staff, guys. And just because Joe Judge has never coached before, I think all of us have, high confidence he's going to be a good coach, but we just don't know. So I think we kind of have to slide him in last year simply because he's never done it before. I think Doug Peterson has to be first based on his recent success. And then I'm good splitting the difference between Ron Rivera and McCarthy in terms of their coaching. Your thoughts, guys?
Well,
yeah, I think you got to split Rivera and McCarthy. Both of those guys are proven winning coaches in this league. Peterson, because he has the Super Bowl ring. I mean, remember, McCarthy's won a Super Bowl too. So, let's not all of a sudden dismiss that as well. But I'd give Peterson has more familiarity with the division. His core coaching staff is still together. And that's how I started off this conversation, so it would be impractical for me to move him down. And Rivera, I can make an argument for 2. McCarthy, I can make an argument for 2. So you're really going to be so minute in terms of those details. I'm fine with your analysis there.
Yeah, I think the real question here, guys, though, it's not just the head coach, it's the staffs. And I've said this for so many years, the staffs really help a lot in terms of making up what you think about the head coach. And I really love the fact that everywhere we go and everybody we talk to, whether they're from the NFL or from the NCAA, they continue to say, boy, the Giants have put together a phenomenal coaching staff. I mean, I've had people say to me they might have one of the top 3 or 4 coaching staffs in the National Football League if you go up and down the staff that Judge has put together. That says a lot to me. I understand what you're saying, though. You're strictly going on the head coach name here without the rest of the stuff together, so you got to go with Peterson 1. I'm not a McCarthy guy, never have been. His teams have underachieved, especially in the postseason.
I think that's fair.
I will take Ron Rivera over McCarthy, and I guess you have to put Joe Judge 4th because he's unproven. But my goodness, it would not at all surprise me because of what he's done with his staff, that he moves up that ladder very quickly.
Oh, it would not shock me if he's the number 2 guy on this list next year. It would not surprise me at all.
I agree.
I'm with you.
See, go ahead, John.
No, I'm finished. Go ahead, Lance.
I was going to say, if we're going to use some of your rationale, Paul, I'll take it a step further. McCarthy has Mike Nolan, previous head coach, as his defensive coordinator. He's got John Fossil as his special teams coach, somebody who was an interim coach and has a wealth of experience and very good special teams. And Kellen Moore has already been with this personnel grouping on offense because he was under Jason Garrett, versus Washington. Jack Del Rio, I like, former head coach, defensive coordinator, and Rivera then has brought in some people who were with him in Carolina. You can argue McCarthy may have better options around him at other key positions on his staff than what Ron Rivera brings to the table if we're going to use your analysis of the Giants.
I could see that. I like some of the guys McCarthy's brought in. The problem is McCarthy is still the head guy. And I'm sorry, but he's like, he's Gene Mark for me. I know he did win a championship, but this is a guy more often than not has had a team that should have been heavily favored in the playoffs, even got home games at Lambeau Field, and found ways to screw up the game plan and lose games. I'm sorry. McCarthy, he may get you to the playoffs, but getting the trophy, that's going to be hard to come by with that guy.
Yeah, Paul, I'm curious to see if, because he's allowed Kellen Moore to leave his offense in for the most part, and I think call plays. So I wonder if that's going to, mitigate some of those weaknesses. You know what I mean? Because frankly, I happen to agree with you. I think those Packers teams did underachieve a bit over the course of his career there. I wonder if he does let go of the reins a little bit on offense. That might help a little bit, but who knows? All right, I got our point totals here, Paulie.
Yeah.
Eagles, 34.5. Not surprising, as we talked about. Tops in the division. Getting a lot of credit for their special teams and their coaching. Cowboys come up number 2. Not far behind at 31.5, which not surprising. Then the Giants, not surprising they're 3rd, but 29.5 points. Just 2 points behind the Cowboys, and then the Redskins pull up the rear at 20.5 points here in the division. So that's where we came here, and I think the Giants, if I remember back from last year, I actually have it up on the bulletin board at the office, which we clearly are not in front of right now. I could look otherwise, but it is up there. I believe the Giants are much closer to second and first place this year than they were when we did this exercise last season, Paul.
Yeah, I suspect that you're right, John, and I also believe that if you would ask the 3 of us, just give me the positions that you think these guys are going to finish in at the end of the year, we all would have said Philadelphia, Dallas, Giants, and Washington. So the numbers as we broke them down came out to indicate exactly what we probably would have thought from the beginning.